So now we are looking at our Tax PI product interface. So here it's a very clean and nice looking interface, and we have both the national and regional control, which will serve as a baseline forecast for our simulations. And before I running the simulation, I would like to introduce the budgets, which is a very unique and special feature of the Tax PI. So let me right click and go to the edit here. And this one is the interface for the budget. So basically it's very highly customized. You can enter in all the categories of revenues here, and then as well as all the categories of expenditures. So revenue, for example, we can go and see the individual income, and I will open this up. So here you can enter the value that you have for the individual income revenue item, and then you can go to the indicator. So basically the indicator is related to the budget item. So the growth rate of this individual income will be linked to the growth rate of wages and salaries here. And we can also select the policy variable that will be associated to the individual income. Here we are selecting the personal taxes. So the personal taxes will be the policy variable that we will enter into the model. So as we can see, the budget feature has all the flexible options and instructions here that will guide you through the entire process of setting up the budget and also calibrating the budget. And then I'm going to the simulations that we have. So as we already mentioned, so we are running two simulations here. So the first one is aid to governments. May take some time. Yeah, so here we are, the simulation one. So let's have a quick look in our input list. We select the state and local government spending as the policy variable, and then we impose a 200 billion increase in the government spending, and this increase will be spread over across Louisiana state and also the rest of the United States. And then we can go to the forecast options here. So one thing that I would like to introduce is the closure options. We are using a Keynesian type, so that means there's no monetary response to physical policy impacts. So we are only consider the physical impacts here. And then let's have a look of our dynamic results. So I will go to the snapshots and then click the economic summary. So there will be a nice summary table that will show up. For the region of Louisiana, we see there's some increase in the total employment as of year 2021. And I can set the region to all regions, so that will show the national level. And here, as Fred already mentioned, we have a 5 million job increase. So that means in like normally a 200 billion physical stimulus will have a significant economic impact. So we'll bring back about 5 million jobs in total. So of course, the COVID constrained the supply and demand side of the economy. So how we show in this simulation may not be the actual case. So a key part of the rescue package is funding for school reopen and also vaccine programs. So this will allow parents to go back to work instead of taking care of their children at home. And also there will be more businesses rehiring layoff employees. So this will raise. Yeah.
And then if we first just look this aid to the local governments, one thing that we wanted to show here is that if we look at with this Keynesian closure, is that we've increased jobs by the 5 million sort of gap between the jobs that were lost and what would not come back under the status quo.
Yes. Yes. So that's how we show in this simulation, and in this case, what if the constraints that the COVID bring be lifted? So we will show a second simulation in order to show you how the participation rate will impact. And now I'm entering the second simulation, so we can have a quick look at the input list. And we select the policy variable, which is the participation rate, and it will be increased by 1% as start with year 2021. And for the forecast options, the closure option type that we chose here is labor supply. So we are adjusting employment by 100% of changes to the labor force. And we can have a look at our results. So here I will click master selection, and then I will set the region to Louisiana state, and the comparison type, set it to the differences. So we can see from the first graph employment by 3 major industries, and we see with more labor re-enter into the job markets, the employment rate is going up. So with the participation rate growing, more jobs are created in each industry. Especially for this one, the service providing sector, we see a huge growth in the service related sector. And we can also see for the other industries, they are steadily growing in the 5 years. And with more job created, many workers go back to the job market. So we would expect a growing in the personal income as well as the disposable income. So the personal income here actually include everything. So include all the wages, salaries, transfer payments, and so on. And the disposable income is the total after-tax income received by each person. So it is the income available to persons for spending or saving. So here this graph shows you will drive up the total personal income and as well as the disposable income. So these two indicators has one side of the story, and the other side of the story is how the participation rate growth will impact on the government budget. So let's take a look at the budget table here, and the region is Louisiana, and I would like to change the comparison type to percent change. So from the table, we see like the total revenues grow about 1%, more than 1% in year 2021. So a growth increase in 1%, a 1% increase in participation rate will actually create more than 1% increase in state revenues. So this is very positive impact on the government budget, and we can also imagine positive impacts across all the states as well as the federal level. So let's go to the next graph, which will show it in a more straightforward way. We can see there's a significantly growth in the total revenues. And now we may be curious about the revenue components. So let's take a deep look. Let's take a look at the revenues components here, and I will show the legends here, and we can see the biggest changes come from the individual income. So we already say like the personal income has been growing. So that's why more people will consume more, which will contribute to the government revenue through the income taxes. And the second biggest changes come from the sales. So more disposable income means more consumer spending. So government will collect more revenues through the sales taxes. And lastly, I would also like to show the expenditure components. So show legend here. We see the biggest changes is the health department. So this makes sense because like the biggest changes may be related to the COVID response and health programs. And in the near future, in the 5 years, we can see most of the expenditures will gradually go back to normal and converge to our baseline forecasts. So we could expect that changes. Yeah. And Fred, would you like to add something?
Yeah, this is terrific. I think the purpose of this modeling exercise is to really emphasize that the most important thing for the U.S. macroeconomy, bringing the economy back to full employment, creating jobs, is a successful reopening of the economy, and the participation rate scenario is meant to show if the efforts are successful in even bringing back 1/2 of the people who have dropped out of the labor force, and that's the best way to increase the economy. And then if we're looking at problems with state and local revenues, that it's also an important revenue generator. And furthermore, if those who have dropped out of the labor force come back into the labor force, then it will provide a long-term benefit. If they come back in 2021, they're likely to stay in the labor force indefinitely into the future. So really, that supply side response, reopening the economy, is much more powerful. Than the mechanism of the traditional sort of Keynesian, how do you get out of recession, is like increase government spending, is very limited in what it can do in this current environment. So we really should be focusing on the components of this legislation, not only to run the economy a little bit hot, which I think does address some of that downside risk of going into a deflationary cycle, but also to support the reopening of the economy. And I do just have, if we move back to my screen, I just have one concluding slide, and then we can jump over to questions.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
I'm giving it back to you, giving the control back to you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I really, excellent, Jay, thank you so much. And then in conclusion, I would just like to show, we're meant to show here that macroeconomic modeling can be used to clarify this very complex economy. So we have a framework to basically, if we're trying to understand how the policy interacts with the economy, macro modeling can help clarify that framework. Also, it can calculate what the effects are. So if we say, well, there's a need to go big in the stimulus, a calculation helps define what big is. Is big 200 billion? Is it a trillion? Is it 2 trillion? Is it 3 trillion? So modeling kind of actually helps to quantify some of these qualitative arguments that have been made, and also to communicate to the general public. And what we're hoping to communicate here is that the core priority is reopening the economy instead of fiscal stimulus, and that's what we can offer here for insights into this first component, critical component of the Biden first 100 days. And with that, I'd love to take some questions. And Austin and Julian, you could rejoin us too.
Hey, Fred, great job. Hajay, great job as well. They said awesome. Fred, we got a couple comments, questions in here. So if you want, I can, while others are kind of typing theirs out, I can read a couple.
Sure.
Wonderful. So Joseph asked about, his question was, he's got a couple questions, so we'll hit them in a series here. First one is, any thoughts on the country going deeper into debt? Future interest payments could hinder any new needed works or programs. So essentially, what's your
right? So one of the concerns is if we're spending 1.9 trillion on short-term rescue, there's a concern that there's going to be an opportunity cost for making longer-term investments, and there's a great deal of uncertainty about what is the result of this debt. Now, the U.S. is the reserve currency for the world. So in a way, the U.S. has much more breadth to be able to have expansionary monetary policy without that undermining the currency. But still, if you provide a very, very high level of stimulus, one of the ways the debt is financed is by that will be likely to increase demand for imports from the rest of the world. So then the trade deficit will widen, and then that will help finance the deficit. Is that with that trade deficit is other countries will then finance the U.S. debt, and this is a concern. There is a limit to the amount of debt that can take on. You can make a persuasive argument is that if the interest rate is so low, if the cost of capital is so low, then the U.S. government should be able to borrow to make investments in infrastructure and other areas for long-term productivity gains. So therefore, a federal investment that's financed by increasing the deficit and borrowing at a rate of 1 or 2% interest rate that can actually generate long-term economic growth, is that deficit can fund itself. But if it's only for short-term stimulus, then that deficit becomes permanent, and there are issues about like whether the federal government can continue to finance that, or are interest payments just going to absorb a larger and larger part of the U.S. Total budget.